Welcome everybody to BASW's 50th birthday celebrations. I am your mistress of ceremonies for the 2 days. My name is Catrice Horsley, and it gives me great honour to introduce the first thing, which is a lot of people wanting to wish you all happy birthday. Get ready for some music, people.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, BASW.
From all of us here at Compass,
Happy 50th birthday, BASW.
Birthday, BASW, from everybody in the social work department at Ulster University. Thank you for supporting, protecting, advocating and developing our profession.
I'd like to wish BASW a very happy 50th birthday and thank them for all the support they do for social workers across the UK.
Happy 50th birthday, BASW.
Pembroke Happis BASW.
Happy birthday, BASW, from the old mugs.
Happis and Hannah Kant I BASW.
Hi, my name's Emma Lowell-Buck and I'm the Member of Parliament for South Shields and also a former child protection social worker. I can't imagine right now what it must be like being a social worker for a profession that's all about human contact and human interaction. Coronavirus has certainly put a spanner in the works for that. But I know that social workers are still out there day and night putting themselves at risk to make sure that others are safe. Coming out of this crisis, we're going to need the strong social work profession's voice for social justice and for change, because things can never go back to the way they were before. But in the meantime, I just want to say, enjoy your celebrations. I've enjoyed working with you over the years. I look forward to working with you in the future. Take care, keep being brave, keep being strong, and keep fighting for what's right. Thank you.
Hi, it's great to be a member of BASW. Happy 50th birthday. Bye. You say bye?
Bye.
Bye.
There you go, some birthday celebrations, a little bit of music. I have been told I can't beatbox. It has been forbidden. I really want to, I can't. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull some of the threads from yesterday's sessions into the here and now, and then I'm going to hand over to the chair for today, who's leading the next session that's coming up. So our first session yesterday morning was about protecting rights, helping people flourish, and is this social work yet? And one of the main threads that came from that, and actually the following session, was this idea of social work has to be political. It is political, whether with a small p or a big P. It was at the front of the civil rights movement. And so we can't extricate ourselves from that. The phrase radical social work kept on coming up as well, and perhaps this idea that we need to become more visible and to take our clenched fists out of our pockets a little bit more often. Lem Sisse, the great poet and author, was talking about how we are made to feel inadequate through this idea of the perfect family. And there was a lot of PR out there promoting perfection and how this leads to us all feeling that we're not quite good enough. Also, the idea of binary concepts, that you're either right or you're wrong, or you're good or you're bad, or you're courageous or you're weak. And actually, one can't exist without the other. And the idea that we're doing the best we can in the chaotic grey area in the middle of all of that. And one of the biggest and strongest things that I took from that session was Trisha Pereira's idea of, because of the death of George Floyd and the phrase, I can't breathe, and because of the coronavirus taking away our breath, there is this sensation that we are holding our breath and wondering what will come next. And linked into that, the idea that perhaps we should use our breath to shout out and make ourselves more visible. In yesterday afternoon session, which was looking at the virtual launch of the book, which has 50 articles, the journal, to represent what has been happening in social work, there were 3 areas: foundations of profession, policy research and practice, and social education and welfare. And there was a lot of discussion about the lived experience, and a lot of discussion about the symbiotic relationship between practice and policy, and how perhaps originally when the journal articles started coming in, they were more based around values and issues, and now it's more empirical bases. And the phrase "keep the social in social work." And then yesterday evening, we finished with music and the celebration of the work that you're doing. The things that I'm taking forward is the idea that you cannot be brave without feeling scared. So the hashtag "be brave." We're brave. We're brave doing what we were doing. The idea that we are so busy doing what we're doing, we forget what we have done. We forget to look backwards at all that we have accomplished. You have been incredible. BASW is young, 50 years. 50 years is not a long time. I was just saying, when I'm 56, I can remember watching the black and white minstrel show and never questioning it. I can remember watching Benny Hill and scantily clad women being chased by an old guy and never questioning it. How much we have come, how far we have come in 50 years. But, and it comes up time and time again, how much we still have to work at being better than we are now. So, accessible research, lived experience, and stay brave. These are the things that I will take forward, and I will hand over to John now, who is going to host the next session, which will all be about how you keep your well full in order for you to quench the thirst of those who need you. John, over to you.
Thanks very much, Catrice. I'm John Dudley. I'm BASW Treasurer, and I'm Chair of the BASW Heritage Steering Group. And you're all very welcome to join us at the launch of the Social Worker Wellbeing and Working Conditions Good Practice Toolkit. And joining us today, we have, I'm delighted, we have a good group of people who are going to lead us through the toolkit, tell us something more about it and the research behind it. And I'll introduce them in a moment. And as Catrice was saying, we learned a lot from yesterday's discussions, and yesterday was also a day of anniversaries. It was actually 10 years to the day yesterday since we had the first austerity budget, which was very much formed part of the last decade of context for the work and for social workers' working conditions. It was also, of course, Windrush Day yesterday, 72 years since the Windrush birthed at Tilbury, and you know, a lot to celebrate in that. And you would hope, I guess, that the workplace for social workers in particular would be a safe and welcoming place for everybody. But unfortunately, as we'll be hearing a little bit more as we go through the research that backs up the toolkit, that is not necessarily so. And there are still things we need to change, a lot that we need to do, a lot that still needs to be achieved to make the workplace for social workers both safe and welcoming. So what I'd like to do now is just quickly move on to introduce our panelists here today, who you can see before you. Firstly, I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Germaine Revalier, who is the main researcher, has been the main researcher on this project from BASW University. And thanks to Germaine for giving us a little wave. And then we have John McGowan, who is the General Secretary of the Social Workers Union. We have the Chief Executive Officer of BASW, Ruth Allen. Hi, Ruth. Then we have Professional Officer from BASW England, Wayne Reed. And Principal Social Worker from Central Bedfordshire, Lyra Aguirre, who is also joining us here. So what we're going to do is we're going to I'm going to ask Jermaine to introduce us to the concepts of and the research behind the toolkit, and we'll have the first three speakers, and then we'll have some time for discussion and debate. And at the bottom of your screens, you should find a couple of things there at the bottom of the screens. One is a chat box, which is for general comment along the way, and also specifically a question and answer box, and we'll try and pick up any questions and answers that you pop into that box at the bottom of your screen and answer those along the way. So if you have particular things that you'd like to ask any of the speakers or generally of the panel, then please feel free to do that, and we'll have time for discussion a little bit later on. So firstly, I'm very happy to hand over to Jermaine to lead us off on the toolkit. Thanks, Jermaine.
Hi everybody, so thanks John. So yeah, my name is Jermaine Revalier from BASW University, and first of all, apologies for my background. I kind of got 3/4 through the way of turning a shed into an office, and then coronavirus hit, so I had to stop. Also the reason for the cap, because my hair's a disgrace. So what I would just want to talk to you through is a little bit behind the history of the work that we've been doing with BASW and with SWU, and kind of talk about why I feel and why the research suggests that the toolkit is needed, and then kind of just give a brief kind of one bullet point overview of the 4 kind of main components, and I'll leave Ruth to kind of go through it in more depth than that. So I first met John McGowan from SWU a few years, it must be about 3 years ago now, and I was originally interested in working with social workers because my wife's a social worker. I'm not, I'm completely independent. I kind of, my wife's a social worker, she tells me about her job every day, but I genuinely still don't know half the stuff that you guys go through. So she was telling me kind of how difficult she found her job. So I kind of looked at some of the research, the statistics in terms of sickness absence and turnover, and kind of how long social workers tend to stay in the job. And I kind of found, and this is nothing new to anybody here, but I think it's quite new to lots of academics, that social work and social care more widely have the highest level of stress and mental health related sickness absence in this country of all sectors. And for me, that was surprising, because it's not just been for 1 year, it's been for over a number of years. And I've always thought of social workers doing such an important and an amazing job. And I just thought, how can it be the case that there are such high levels of sickness absence? So contacted John, and eventually we spoke with Ruth, and we run the first 2 surveys that I'm sure lots of people in this call have been part of. And kind of what we found over that time is that compared to the UK average, the working conditions of social workers are pretty bad generally. It's not the same for everywhere, for every employer, but generally across social work it's pretty bad. And we found that social workers were working on average around about 11 hours per week more than you're contracted to. And to me, I thought, oh, wow, that's a lot. But again, to anybody in the social work world that I've spoken to, they said, yeah, it's what we do. It's not sustainable, you know? To me, that kind of equates as an extra day and a half a week. That's like working Monday to Saturday and half a Sunday. And that's just not sustainable. Half of respondents were dissatisfied in the role, so very low job satisfaction. And 2/3, and this really stood out to me, 2/3 of social workers had worked at least a couple of times in a previous year while they were so ill they should have taken time off work. And that's not just cold and flu, that could be working through with kind of significant physical health problems, and I guess more importantly, significant mental health problems as well. And the way that I looked at it is, if you're suffering, how can you provide the best care that you need to provide to your service users? And also we found that lots and lots, kind of nearly half, were looking to leave the job or leave their role in the next kind of 18 months. And the reason this was kind of interesting is not the right word, but I'll use it. Interesting for me is because that clearly has a knock-on effect in so many ways. So we know that, for example, high levels of sickness absence has, and mental health at work and stress at work and poor working conditions has a huge impact on the physiological health of individuals. So it's chronic stress at work, for example, is really closely related to the development of cardiovascular disease and things that can lead to diabetes. And we know it will impact our psychological health, but also our subjective behaviors. So have a stressful day at work, and you might go home and have a couple of glasses of wine, and you do that every day, and it's not sustainable for your health. It has a knock-on effect on your organization, so turnover, sickness absence, presenteeism, which I was just talking about, and also the cost of people to cover those who have gone off sick is huge. But I think the most important one, and the thing that social workers kind of highlighted most frequently, was the impact that you would then have on service users and the care that you can provide to them. So I know that, for example, from the academic research, high levels of sickness, of stress and poor working conditions in health and social care can lead to more mistakes. It leads to less permanence among service users and that kind of thing. Now, I want to highlight that this isn't the fault of social workers. To a person that we spoke to in surveys and interviews, we asked, what do you like about your job? And the answer was, we love making a difference in people's lives. So this isn't an issue with social work, it's an issue with the structural systems around you. So based on this and the existing literature, we interviewed, so we surveyed 5,000 or so people over a couple of years, and we interviewed 30 to 40, I can't remember the exact number now, social workers and social work managers and a few other kind of related professionals. And we kind of developed this toolkit. And the aim of the toolkit is to put something together that can touch each kind of area that we focused on. So whether it's the individual social worker, aiming to provide you kind of with self-help and self-coping mechanisms, if it's the team, if it's managers, or if it's organizations. And that's the way that we've broken down the toolkit. So for example, we've looked at individual self-help and self-care. Now, as I said, looking at the individual and what you can do as an individual is important, because we all need to take responsibility for our own health. But it's just kind of putting a plaster over the wound. It's dealing with the symptoms rather than the cause of that symptom. But we've kind of outlined a number of things that individuals can do, and these are easy things that everybody can do based on research and the stuff that we've looked at, to support your own health and well-being. And that's important, because if we don't look after ourselves, as we said, we can't look after the people that we're working with. We've looked at the importance of supervisory support and leadership support, and also the wider team. So what can be done within the wider team and within the wider kind of teamwork setting to support working conditions and the health and well-being of social workers. And finally, and this is the big one, and this is kind of the one that will probably take the most systemic and organizational changes. We've looked at managers, and we've looked at organizational leadership and the organization itself. So, as I said, lots of what we've discussed has been about individuals and supporting yourself and supporting the people around you. But as I said, that just deals with the symptom. And what we want to do is we want to get rid of the things that are causing the poor health among social workers. So in the toolkit, we look at numerous managerial and organizational improvements to look at how we can reduce the difficulties that individuals face. So we looked at communication, workload, case allocation, bullying and harassment, and many others. And then, as I said, I'll let you talk through those in more depth. So overall, we're looking to support the mental health and well-being of social workers through improving working conditions at an organization, at an individual level, at a team level, at a managerial level, and at an organizational level. So if we can work to improve the way that we look after our own health, we can help the people around us that we work with to support their health too, and the people above us can support us. It feels as though we have a rounded approach to supporting individuals' health and well-being. Thanks, John. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Jermaine. And please do keep your questions and comments coming in, and we'll pick some of those up a little later. But firstly, I'd like to pass straight over to John McGowan, who's going to tell us a little bit about trade unionism, work and well-being. Over to you, John.
Thanks, John. And it's always hard following Jermaine because he's always so clear and articulate. So well done, Jermaine. That was a great summary. So for the next 6 minutes or so, I'll try to focus on trade unionism, work and well-being. So a snappy wee title for you. So let's try to get through some of that. And for me, it's really been a valuable experience being part of the Working Conditions campaign and, of course, the Wellbeing Toolkit project. And as Jermaine said, we've certainly come a long way since Jermaine and I met about 3 years ago. And really with the research and building with the toolkit along with BASW, I think we've achieved a lot and there's still a lot to go. But for me, the toolkit provides tremendous information for social workers. It gives us a chance to reference, it gives us a chance to use, and it's all about creating positive well-being opportunities. So it's not rocket science, it's that opportunity to create well-being opportunities. And I'm sure that this will be a valuable resource, and it's really for anybody concerned about their own well-being and a chance to reflect on that. Before we go any further, I think it's important to answer the question, what is well-being? Because for me, well-being is one of the most overused phrases in the English language. And I've seen it advertised constantly. I've seen it advertised for yogurts, for holidays. I've seen it advertised for pillows. And even recently, there was a bed advert which linked to well-being. So for some people, the very phrase well-being can sometimes refer to happiness. But for others, some people think of being healthy body and maybe a healthy mind. And even the UK government, I mean, they've started a wellbeing index, and it's intended to gauge the quality of life of people in the UK, but it focuses on environmental and sustainability and environment and sustainability issues. So I suppose there's no any real agreement about well-being, and this is why it's become a convenient label for almost any health-related initiative. So hopefully, by focusing on social workers, we can get it right. And often, in my experience of the workplace, is that management in the workplace, they often use the term well-being. And for me, it's just a way to bypass trade unions and other representatives. And they have organisations called wellbeing ambassadors who it's great, they look at wellbeing, but they don't take any action really. And there's nothing for workers to reflect on. So for me, really, this wellbeing guide, I've no doubt that it will help and it will assist trade unions and employee representatives and hopefully developing knowledge and promoting the engagement with employers. And really what we want is I think we all want to improve health and well-being in Britain's workplaces. And if you look at the government agency ACAS suggests there are 6 indicators, that's 6 indicators of healthy workplace. So let's have a look at the list. Let's see where I suppose we might be in the list. But the first one is that ACAS suggests well-being is achieved by line managers are confident and trained in people skills. So if you're listening to this or watching this, if you've got a line manager that's confident in people skills, then well done, you've got a tick there. The second one that ACAS suggests is that employees feel valued and involved in the organisation. So again, that sense of being valued and part of the decision making is important to social workers. And the third one is that your managers should use appropriate health services, and that could be occupational health. And really that's to tackle absence and get you back into work. So again, you can see that you can base that on your own experience of your workplace, how you're achieving that. And the fourth one for ACAS is that managers should promote an attendance culture by conducting return to work discussions. So if you've been unfortunate, if you've been off with stress or illness or bereavement, it's about getting you back into work again. And the fifth one that ACAS suggests is that your job should be flexible and well designed. So have you got a job? Is it flexible? Is it well designed? And finally, ACAS suggests, and this is number 6, that the managers know how to manage common health conditions. So if your manager's good at discussing mental health issues or musculoskeletal disorders, then again, brilliant. If you've got all 6, then according to ACAS, you're on the way to healthy well-being. But disturbingly, research indicates that more people are in work with a mental health condition than ever before, and that's across all workplaces and all ages. And research again shows that in any one year, over 1 in 4 people in the general population and 1 in 6 workers are likely to be suffering from a mental health condition. That is, that's quite significant. And that's why members of our union, SWU, and of course BASW, and I suppose all unions should be active really in campaigning around working conditions and well-being in the workplace. And for me, this toolkit provides additional opportunities to emphasise this, and really for us all to reflect on the need for interventions regarding well-being. Because ultimately, looking after the vulnerable requires us as social workers to prioritise our own well-being too. And you might ask, well, why is this important? Why is well-being important? I've been trained, I've got all this ability, I've got supervision, but it is important because as social workers, we have to listen to and we support service users every single day. And that's regardless of what's going on in our own lives. We've all got things going on. But sometimes as our job, we have to listen to service users talking about sometimes very distressing experiences, or we might learn about a suicide, or we might learn about something's happened to a service user. These are hard things to absorb. And of course, we've got a great model of supervision in social work, but alone, we cannot safeguard the psychological well-being of social workers just through good supervision. So for me, very clearly, it's important that social workers can understand and really recognise the symptoms of psychological distress. And for me, looking at the toolkit, which is available now, I think there's a link, you can download it. You can achieve this with some work and some reflection, because good social work requires, we all know this, we all know that good social work requires alertness and attention to detail. It requires us to have clear thinking, good decision making. So really, we should be focusing on our physical and emotional well-being. It's something we've all got to work at. But like everything else new, it takes time to embed new behaviours, doesn't it? It's something new, so we've got to change our attitude, and we should not expect instant results overnight. But if we care about our work, and we all do, we all want to be well enough to carry on doing social work for a very long time. It's something that well-being and the concept of well-being, I think we all should invest in. And just to finish there, in the back of my mind always is a firmly held belief that well-being interventions, they must serve the long-term interests and well-being of social workers at large. I hope you enjoy the toolkit, and I hope you enjoy the remainder of the session. Thanks for listening to me.
Thanks very much, John. And I'm going to hand straight over to Ruth now, who's going to tell us a little bit more about the contents of the toolkit.
Thanks, John. Thanks everybody who's listening. It's taken a while to finish this toolkit, and we're absolutely delighted that we've been able to conclude it. Its finishing was held up by coronavirus, and actually what we've done is we've included references to some of the coronavirus challenges in the toolkit itself. One thing I would say is that this is a finished product, and I think it works together as a whole. And I'd kind of encourage people to have a read through the whole thing. You don't have to read every word, but kind of read through all of the different sections, because it says a lot about our approach. Our approach is one that we describe as integrated, and I think that it takes on some of the issues that both Jermaine and John have already raised about things that are sometimes pushed to the side when people use notions of well-being or workplace improvement rather loosely, and I'm going to come back to that when I talk about the different elements. We are not the only people working in this space now of improving working conditions with social workers, and I'm delighted about that. I think Jermaine's research and our work together has pushed this up the agenda for other organisations as well. For instance, we're involved with the local government associations work on this, and some of their partners were part of those discussions around improving the use of the health check in England. And then there are equivalents with employment standards across the UK, and different ways in which across the UK the 4 countries check on the well-being of social workers, and the absolutely crucial need to improve working conditions, to improve recruitment, retention, stability in the workforce, and yes, absolutely, workforce well-being, and to be able to keep providing services to the people that we work with in a consistent and fresh way. So this is coming into a space where there are others that we are engaged with and talking with as well. We think there's something that we do here that is quite distinctive. The distinctive elements of the toolkit are, we could describe it as an integrated and holistic tool. Firstly, it's UK-wide, so that it makes reference to things that are going on in different parts of the UK. And as we can do in BASW, we can bring together learning from how social work is across the UK. And indeed, with our global links, we make links with working conditions across the globe as well. So that I think is important. So it's got that learning, and I've taken feedback from social workers across the UK, as has Jermaine, so it has that. John mentioned this in his introduction, that's John Dudley, JD, I think I have to recall you, about austerity. One of the things that we take into account in this toolkit is some descriptions about what it's like to be a social worker now and what it's been like over the last 10 years, with a long haul of austerity in public services, in welfare, and the impact of that on well-being of social workers. We talk in the toolkit about the ethical dilemmas that raises, and also this concept of moral distress, which is an idea, comes out of nursing actually, originally. It's completely relevant, and it's about the fact that social workers, as motivated, political, justice-driven workers, absolutely want to do the right thing. They don't want to just do things they're told to do. And where you have a clash between what people want to do, what they're professionally trained to do, what their ethics are telling them they want to do, and the reality on the ground, we expect some of that in professional practice. It happens, but if that's your daily grind, and if that's something you can't get beyond, you don't have support to get beyond, that can be very distressing. It's integrated because the toolkit is integrated because we do indeed, as Jermaine was saying, offer tools for individual social workers, and think about what it is that gets in the way of social workers looking after themselves. So it's absolutely a personal responsibility on all of us to look after ourselves. But there are things perhaps about the social work task and about our culture as a profession that sometimes can get in the way, and we put other people before ourselves far too frequently. So it deals with that. It talks about, I think distinctively, in addition to talking about the socioeconomic austerity and funding context in which much of social work happens, it also talks about the importance of the collective identity and the independent identity of social workers. That could be through a whole range of professional networks that aren't necessarily tied to your employer. Employer support is absolutely crucial, but so is your independent identity. Social work isn't just about how your employer defines it. So that's about BASW, that could be about other professional groupings that you're part of. And then of course also we talk about the role of the trade union. So we talk about the role of the trade union and the importance of that, and how that is a partner not only to social workers, but also to employers. Because if you're working well with professional body, you're working well with trade union. And if social workers also have clear ideas, understanding of their rights, you can deal with things earlier. You can deal with things, and if you're empowering social workers, any workers indeed, to have, to be able to represent themselves and also collectively represent their profession to their employer, you can have earlier conversations and prevent strife and resolve things. So it's integrated because it absolutely encourages managers. There are tools and ideas for managers and tools and ideas for organisational leaders, and underpinning it is the idea, not a new idea, nothing new under the sun, but we say it clearly, to work together with the frontline practitioners and let frontline practitioners own and drive the improvements that will make a difference to their lives, and through that you will support the whole system of the organisation in a healthy sense. We talk about learning culture. Well-being is often founded on feeling you're working in a place where not only will you be treated fairly, but if things go wrong, there will be learning, and there will be analysis of near misses, so that you don't so that you again avoid serious incidents happening, because you're learning all the time, and there's dialogue around that. So I want to just say there's much more in the toolkit. I'll just say a few things to conclude. Very important things. One thing is that there are lots of little exercises and kind of checklists. So the idea is it engages you in thinking. It doesn't require you to do anything terribly arduous as you read through it, but it's just got lots of stimulations for thought about how you, as a social worker or as a manager, leader, practice supervisor, practice leader, which are also covered, think about things, and it gives you some ideas. When we put in the coronavirus editions, one of the things that was absolutely in our mind was the impact of coronavirus differentially on the workforce, on people from different ethnic backgrounds, people who had different characteristics, but particularly we knew that there was this major disparity in the number of Black and minority ethnic workers that were affected and dying. And BASW's done a lot with SWU to make sure that we got some guidance there around risk that addresses that. But throughout the document, we are thinking about who social workers are and the differential risks and needs that they may have. Social workers are predominantly women. In the younger age groups, they're now 90% women. It's a mixed population, people from Black and minority ethnic communities across the UK, diaspora communities from across the world, from Europe, from all over. We are that diverse workforce, and we need approaches to well-being and absolute justice within the workplace, so that whoever you are, whatever your background, whatever your needs, maybe you have a disability, that all of those things can be taken into account, and that you can be supported to do your work and feel safe at work, free from bullying, free from harassment, and able to progress your career. So those things are also woven through the toolkit. I'm going to stop there. Gone on. And but thank you for listening, and have a look, and hope the link is now working. It's on the website, and you've got a link through the chat box, which I hope is now working.
Thanks very much, Ruth. I believe it is indeed, from comments that I've seen going through. So we're going to pause there just for a moment or two to pick up a couple of questions that have come in. The first one, if I can find it, is a practical question, which is about whether any design thinking is being done in relation to social workers' workplaces. So I guess that's in relation to the physical environment in which social workers work. And Jermaine, are you aware of anything by way of design thinking that's happening in social work environments?
I don't think there was much happening until the coronavirus hit, and I'm only talking about this from very anecdotal work from my wife, who went into work for the first time yesterday since everything hit. And yeah, they're looking to redesign workplaces to, meet social distancing and make sure everybody's safe and stuff. But I don't know a huge amount more outside of that. Although, yeah, John.
Yeah, John McGowan.
Yeah, I think there's probably not been a lot of sort of, good positive designs, but there's certainly been a lot of bad designs, and I suppose the word being inappropriate designs for the social work task, and we're hearing that quite constantly, that things are not set up for social workers as they should be. So I think we all need to reflect on the design and also what's needed, and you can link into the actual BASW sort of points on that. And of course, SWU's got a survey on that, which is live at the moment. So I think we have to put more action into local authorities to make sure that they stay focused on the needs of social workers moving on. But whoever answered the question, it was a good question, but to answer that, then it's certainly no from what we are hearing.
Okay, thank you, John. And Lyra has a comment as well.
Yes, I'm just reflecting on what we've done where we work, and I know other regions have also done so. We've very much asked our workforce what it is that they need, rather than told them what it is that we're doing. And that for some people in the workforce means they want to come in for a couple of days a week, and the remainder of the time they can be at home. So we've done individualized assessment of each person across the board, and that includes workspace and whether they want to come in or not. I am also aware in the region, in the Eastern region, there's similar work as well, so just want to bring that angle to it as well.
Thanks very much. And Ruth has a quick comment on this one.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I do think it's important that as social workers, we look at things like workplace design and use of time and ergonomics and other things that come from other fields as well. And I think one of the problems that we've had is that we've tended sometimes within organisations and across the sector to only look within our sector, perhaps. And I think it's really important I think it's a really important question actually. Coronavirus will force a whole range of redesigns, and that includes things like how we use digital, how we use our time, how we use travel, how we communicate, and it will force, I think, some new thinking. And I'm hoping that one of the positive things that will come out of this terrible situation is that we will learn a great deal from that. Can I also say that working with Jermaine as a non-social worker, but with a very strong vested interest in social work in his household, has been great. You're getting a different perspective. So that dialogue from other disciplines, I think, is really, really helpful. And that goes to things like, hot desking. Lots of debate about hot desking. We need to see how other professionals and other industries do or don't use hot desking and the issues that they have, and decide whether not popular at the moment because they're not very sanitary.
Okay, thanks very much, Ruth. Well, I'm going to move on now to a different area, a different question that's come up. I know we've covered some of the COVID-related questions. I think Ruth touched on them there, which have also been brought up by participants. But this one is a little bit different to that, and it points out that sometimes we as social workers require social work. And the questioner raises the particular question as to how in the workplace social workers can be supported, and specifically makes reference to mental health first aid training within the profession, and how can this happen? And I wonder if perhaps I could ask Wayne to perhaps make a comment in relation to that.
Sorry, John, my connection went a bit iffy there. Would you just repeat that slightly for me, please?
Yeah, sure. The question was about how we can support social workers in the workplace who perhaps need help themselves, and it's specific reference to mental health first aid training within the profession, and how that might be able to come about, how we can support people in their work, perhaps in that particular way.
Yeah, I think one of the things that springs to mind is that as social workers, we have universal skills that I think can be applied in lots of different areas. And so things like peer support, for example, quite often can be underestimated in different working environments. Some places have it, some places don't. Some places it's sort of formalized, other places it's relatively informal. So I do think peer support has a large part to play. I think depending on what people are going through as well, it may be that actually if people may need more specialist support. So it's how as an employer, people or organisations are able to signpost people to professional help and support as well. And that might be referrals to occupational health or to social work services within a local area that are, of course, mindful of confidentiality and conflicts of interest within the workplace and so on. So yeah, I think there's lots of different ways that we can look at it. I think a lot of it's really about being creative. That would be my view, as opposed to maybe relying on bureaucratic systems that might already be in place.
Great, thanks very much, Wayne. I'm just going to move on actually to one just last quick question in this section, then we'll have a couple more little bits of input before we go on again. But this is a very quick question for Ruth, I think here, which asks if the employer organisations such as the Association's Director of Children's Services have been consulted on the toolkit, and have they agreed to incorporate any of the suggestions and recommendations, and likewise perhaps with government departments. So perhaps a quick answer to that one, Ruth.
So government departments, ADAS, ADCS, other PSW networks, they're aware of this work, and some have been more particularly involved, and there's definitely interest in it. I think our next step is to work with employers, and we will be also publishing some implementation tools which will be about how we can engage with individual employers and get the buy-in of employers' organisations. And really the proof of this toolkit will be if and when when it becomes really useful and is felt to be useful by employers and crucially by social workers. And that's a kind of an iterative process that we'll work on. This is a long term. We absolutely have to resolve this. And as a trade union, as a professional association, this is our stock in trade. This is what we need to make a difference on. So we're in this to, if we have to make adjustments, we will, and we will be talking with all those stakeholders about how we can work together.
Thanks very much, Ruth. Now we'll pick up a few more questions a little bit later, but right now I'd like to hand back over to Wayne for him to give his input to the session. Thanks, Wayne.
Thank you, John. What I would like to talk about is to talk further about what kind of workplace support is available or should be available for people who are Black or from an ethnic minority, given the context that we're currently in of the Black Lives Matter campaign, which I'm sure some of the viewers will have seen a lot of the good work that BASW have been doing, a lot of the campaigning online, etc. And just to look through some of what we've discussed really through that sort of prism. And it links in, I guess, with what I was saying around workplace support for people as well. And it was really just a few suggestions that I wanted to kind of throw out to the panel in terms of additional areas of support in addition to the toolkit that we've talked about. So the first one being that given the recent murder of George Floyd, different social work organisations have been variable, shall we say, in their responses to that in terms of statements, in terms of outright condemning racism, statements that relate to the values and ethics of social work in terms of anti-oppressive and anti-discriminatory practice, and more fundamentally, anti-racism. There's been some variable responses to that, as I say, and I do feel that it's a fundamental core aspect of social work. So, one important area that I think that organisations should explore is to have a very strong, clear commitment in the form of a statement initially that will, I'm sure, be welcomed by their staff and their service users and other stakeholders who are from Black and ethnic minority communities. And also for that statement to include some form of action plan in terms of how those organisations plan to support workers, to challenge racism within the workplace, and to revisit structures and policies and procedures within organisational and operational practices as well. So I do think that's important. Another suggestion or proposal that I believe would be useful is for senior leaders within organisations to have the opportunity to be in some capacity reverse mentored by staff members who are from Black and ethnic minority communities. And I wouldn't want to be too prescriptive in terms of how that might look. But in BASW, for example, in BASW England, we have a mentoring scheme which works really well. We've had fantastic feedback in terms of the mentoring that has been utilised to support social workers and student social workers. And I just think through this particular lens or prism of Black Lives Matter, that actually that is an effective model that's proven to work, that could be used to educate, raise awareness, and tackle some of these issues in the workplace. And I think it would be really helpful, both from a personal and professional point of view, for staff members who are from Black and ethnic minority backgrounds to be able to support senior leaders in terms of how they address those issues in the workplace. So that's another suggestion. Well, I'll leave it there for the moment, really. I don't want to kind of hog the limelight, but I'd be interested to see what the other panelists' views are on that.
Okay, anybody like to come in on what Gwen's been saying? Yes, John McGann.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Wayne, we've had this discussion, and I think it's very important, particularly in the trade union world. I think the majority of general secretaries, or even activists in the trade union world, you can say they're white, they're male, they're probably in the 50s plus. That's not me actually, but they're that age, and I think it's about getting it right. So I suppose it's not just to add it on as a policy; it's making sure it's clear and meaningful. And I know our organisation, the General Federation of Trade Unions, we're very active looking at that. We're going to spend some time as an executive, so all unions can get it right, not just one union, that we're all speaking the same language and we're doing it right. So I would agree with everything you said. I think you're I mean, I've obviously been following you. If you don't follow Wayne's tweets, I mean, there's a lot of good information there, and I've learned a lot. So I think it's about that education factor, isn't it? Because I think we've all got a lot to learn. But I don't just want to add a policy on and tick a box off. I want to make sure it's right, but I also want to make sure that we have a range of diversity in our own executive. And if anybody's listening here and they want to join our executive, there's places coming up in the next few months, and that's the same for the same for BASW. So I think we have to help and assist in creating that diversity. But Wayne, I agree with everything you said, but I think the trade union world's got to get it right, because it is white male and over 50 led. So there you go.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, John. Thanks a lot.
Yes, Jermaine.
I think, as I said earlier, Wayne's got some fantastic suggestions, and I think kind of adding to that, I think there's a lack of non-white people, as John has said, in senior leadership in lots and lots of organisations, and that needs to be addressed. But I think it needs to be done so carefully, because it's very easy to bring us into leadership as a tick box rather than as an actual thing that organisations want to do. And also, I think there needs to be a lot of support through the promotion and the leadership opportunities that are offered to everybody. I think there are things that we all as individuals can do, so we can kind of challenge certain words and behaviours and approaches that, let's face it, Wayne and I on this panel won't be around and we won't hear, but other people may do. So I think they're a challenge. I'm not saying that you guys wouldn't do, but there's something that everybody can do. But also I think it goes beyond the workplace. I mean, think about the books that we all have at home, what we talk to our kids about, what we show our kids, the TV programs we watch, the food we eat, all of those kind of things, I think, would all make a difference in changing the wider culture, both within the workplace and what we do outside of it kind of filters back into work. So lots of really interesting stuff from Wayne, I think.
Thanks very much, Jermaine, and a lot of appreciation on the chat as well for the contribution that Wayne is making in terms of helping to provide information and advice for us to read and to look at. So that's important stuff.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Wayne. Now, what I'd like to do now is we'll come back to some of the questions in a moment, but I'd like to move on now, if I might, to Lyra to tell us a little bit more about how the toolkit could be working in practice.
Thank you, John. So, well, I wanted to start really just by acknowledging the 172 people in this room. And the reason I wanted to acknowledge you, although I can't see you all, was really very much to acknowledge the time that you're taking right now, not just to celebrate, but also to consider your own well-being and that of your colleagues, and how that relates to what I want to talk to you about. In particular, how you taking care of your own well-being and that of your colleagues will eventually actually make a difference to the adults that we work with. And my interest in well-being started a couple of years back, and it was very much sparked by the BASW and BASW University research. And at that point, I was quite active in BASW. I was also in a PSW role in a different region. Feels like a long, long time ago. And I was really, there was nothing I read there that was a surprise. It was almost like there was absolutely nothing that was a surprise. But what it did do is it just gave me confirmation of what I knew and my experience and that of colleagues and others. And I've worked across a number of organisations, most of which have been actually really good organisations and probably better than others. And yet I still could, it resonated with me and the experience of colleagues across the board. I actually found it impossible to disregard at the time. And I also found it unacceptable, and yet what I could see 3 years ago was that it didn't have the response that I thought it would have. And I felt quite disappointed by that at the time. I felt quite disappointed by colleagues across the different networks, because I felt that it was a significant piece of work and one that couldn't be ignored. And at that time, I was left with a disappointment, and then I kind of turned inward and thought, well, what am I going to do about this? What's my role within this? And I saw the opportunity to actually do something for my behalf as the principal social worker, but also, first of all, I started with myself. So I started to read about wellbeing. I started to train privately around wellbeing. And I started to actually decide, well, I'm going to do something, and became really aware of one key thing for me. I became really aware and conscious of something that was kind of known to me, but it just had taken a few years to come through. And that was that there's a real gap between the beliefs and values and the work of social work and the power of influence that it has, versus social work living in the organizations which seem to be quite unconscious to that. They seem to be unconscious to the power of social work and releasing that. And for me, that was the issue, that organizations were limiting social workers and social work practice. And in itself, that was having quite a big impact on social workers' practice and also on their own well-being. And that was a really significant moment for me, because it wasn't about me, it wasn't about my colleagues, but it was very much about that whole system. Where is social work sitting, and the differences between them. And I came to the realization that really I should be very focused in ensuring that we release social work practice to its potential, and that we needed the correct mechanisms in the organizations where I worked for social work and social workers to be acknowledged, but also supported to thrive and not just survive. Survival isn't good enough. Survival isn't something that should be accepted. And from that point, I sort of felt that the concept about becoming aware and conscious of this kind of made me think about, well, what am I going to do? And I started to look at the concept of, now that I'm conscious and self, how can I make others conscious of that? So my role very much was going to be supporting others to become conscious of that, not just in social workers, but also teams, and also my employer. Because the only way forward to support wellbeing, how I saw it, was to make sure that we understood the strengths of the employers, of social workers, of the workforce. And in order to do that, we also needed to understand the strengths of the workforce. And there are incredible knowledge and the skills of social workers beyond social work practice that can support wellbeing. And so we started utilizing the concept of the strengths and knowledge of social workers to support it in a peer-led way. So everything that we were going to be doing was going to be led by social workers. It wasn't going to be me. I was just going to become a facilitator. At that point, we did a survey, a wellbeing survey in the health check. We identified what we knew would come. We very much compared, well, what does the survey that Jermaine and BASW had done locally. We identified the issues. We did an action plan. And at that point, I didn't really ask for permission. I put it as one of the priorities for the BASW, and gathered interested people. They didn't necessarily need to be across adult social care. Made really strong links with public health in particular, where the greatest assets for us in implementing and embedding wellbeing for social workers. And just at that time, I started to create something just to simplify it, so something called wellbeing coaching workshops, and that's very much to support that self-awareness. What am I doing? What can I do? What do I need? What's individual to me? And rolled all of that out, utilized the research that was done, and very much supported people to come up with an action plan for themselves. So all of the teams, every single person walked out of the coaching workshops with a little action plan for themselves. But not only that, what were they going to be asking their manager for? What did they need from us? What did they need from us as an organisation? What could we do better? What could we do differently? And it was a level of acknowledgement about all the moral distress, all of the research, PTSD, all of the things that we don't need to go into, that we know are true in our work environments and true to social work practice. Just almost simultaneously, Jermaine came in contact, I think it was via ADAS, I can't remember exactly, but with the offer of creating the wellbeing app, which I clearly jumped to. And we worked and did surveys. We've contributed to the toolkit. We launched the app. That certainly created for us a very keen interest on that concept of we will participate, we will create. Social workers were the ones leading this. And we were facilitating it in a way. We were also very fortunate to get a report that also gave us areas. We came out really quite well compared to other areas, but we still could identify a number of areas that we could work to. And so from that, we created an action plan, but across the board with public health, because they've got particular expertise. For those of you who will be interested in undertaking work in your organisations, public health professionals have got really good expertise in these areas, and they certainly supported us to really step up our offer for social workers. On top of that, we created something we've called Wellbeing Action Plans, which is a preventative tool for managers to meet with employers, with actually a member of staff, a social worker. This is very much aside from the HR process, and that was a slight difficulty. Very much looking at prevention. How will I know you're not well? Do you know who's your natural support? The peer trees, and you'll see in the toolkit the concept about that peer support when you go into the detail. So we've got a management tool that's voluntary, that isn't to be used for sickness, that isn't to be used for HR processes, which is very much about getting to know each other. How will I know if John was not feeling well and needed me to support him? What would I notice? Those sort of things. And who might I go to if he's withdrawing? And what might John want me to do if I saw that? And on top of that, quite a lot of focus on our employee assistance program, which is quite comprehensive, which that's the psychological support, that's the one-to-one, making sure that people knew about the app and that they were utilising it. One of the most beautiful things that came out of it was very much that social work teams started to do their own peer-led initiatives. So after the coaching workshops and after the launch of the app, social workers themselves in their teams started running their own yoga sessions. They started to run their own meditation sessions. We've had exchanges of recipes. We've had multitude of activities that have been led by them. And it was very much about asking our social workers, what do you like and enjoy outside of work? What might you do to support a colleague's well-being? And then people started to share their knowledge. And it's no surprise that we've got an absolute wealth of knowledge around well-being, because well-being is so varied and rich to what it means to different people. It might be from exercise, it might be music, it might be singing. Well-being isn't one thing in one box. And so we found the attributes of those social workers and kind of supported the strengths. And that really invigorated people. There's more to talk about, but I won't go into now, which is about influencing the corporate agenda. We've actually influenced the corporate agenda quite heavily. and we've worked on the LGS standards and we're working on the health check. But what's been really interesting, we built really strong partnership with Jermaine and supported the toolkit. We are uploading content on a, Jermaine supports us now, even though as busy as he is, uploading content live. We building up meditation sessions that I ran. I put out of my own comfort zone, and I now run meditation sessions, but other people ran other sessions. And then COVID came. And so COVID came and we had the most amazing platform, and we had really good knowledge about this. And we had an interesting conversation very early on through COVID about, well, what do we need to do now? We very much took the adult social care approach, and our adult team really were incredible at the support that they've provided. So they created something, I'm not sure about the name of it, but it wasn't the concept. They created a welfare cell, and that welfare cell would actually take responsibility, managers for checking on people who lived alone, for people who were isolated, looking at desks, making sure that we were supporting individuals who may be worried about COVID, about PPE. I mean, absolutely everything that you could advocate for was sort of covered in that area. And also making sure that we were doing surveys and making sure that we're keeping in touch with people about how they were feeling. Also very much the keeping in touch via Teams and making sure that people did not feel disconnected, because one of the things that we knew, and Jermaine's work helped us solidify, was the importance of peer support in social work, and that COVID really took that away, and we had to replace that with technology, and we very quickly found that mechanism to actually do that virtually. And that, I think, has been really positive to us. There are clearly difficulties to it. I'm just conscious of time.
Yeah, sorry, we will need to move on in a moment there.
So we've done managers' guides, lots of other things which I will never get time to cover. But I think just to end on the next steps, I think if it serves for anything, we've had amazing feedback from our employers, but there's so much more that we need to do. And the next steps for us are very much, we now have wellbeing as a actually strand within our transformation. But I think broadening and sharing things with children's services is something that we've been doing. My sort of message to people in the call is anybody can initiate wellbeing initiatives within our workplace. It doesn't require money. I have not to spend a penny of any budget on this, but we've utilized knowledge, passion, and commitment actually to wanting to make a difference.
Thanks very much, Lyra. That's been really good to hear, and reminding us of the importance of not just surviving but thriving, and how it can be done even without great resources, great financial resources being put into it. So thanks very much for that. I just want to pick up one or two questions. We've got a few minutes left. I know a few people who have perhaps been joining us on their lunch break have had to go, but they've given many notes of appreciation. That we've got time just to pick up one or two questions before we close in a few minutes. But I do just want to come back to one point, the point about mental health first aid and the fact that some of us might become service users. Just to make a comment, if I may, that normally in a panel of this sort, we would expect to have a person of lived experience actually here with us to contribute their views directly. And we had planned that for this session. Unfortunately, in the end, it wasn't possible for it to happen. But I just wanted to acknowledge that that's something that we do see as particularly important. And just very quickly, I'd like to look at one of the questions that's come up, which is about whether there needs to be a political shift, if you like, to move us towards proactive and preventative services, and whether that would actually make life better for social workers. And the particular example is given in terms of proactive and preventative social care having been very high on the agenda over the last few weeks. Ruth, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, I think all of the research that's been done writing the toolkit, you can't get away from the fact that one of the things that is stressful is that social workers often feel they're working within systems of care and regimes of support which are not which are too late in the day, so they're dealing with more crisis than they should be dealing with, and they're not able to do preventive work, and they're dealing with overwork with too little resources. So I think one of the many things that I think is needed to really make this kind of shift the tanker around social workers' experience at work is to ensure that social workers are really involved as a profession in designing, you know, the future of social care for adults and for children that is preventive, that is proactive, that is actually about not only being a safety net when people have really fallen through, which is often where social work has tended to be, but is actually able to do the preventive work that we've got, you know, in the Care Act in England and that we've got in similar legislations around the UK. We should be doing that. So, and I think that is intrinsically linked to a sense of well-being, feeling that you've got some control, you're having some influence, and that you're helping to shape services that really make a difference and get in there early and help people thrive in their daily lives. And I think that helps social workers thrive as well.
Thanks, Ruth. And well, there are many questions that it would be great to pick up. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. But thank you all very much as panelists for your contribution. Thank you for those that are listening. And I'll hand over to Catrice to draw the session to a close.
I always have my camera off so that I can avidly make notes. And for me, one of the strongest themes that came out from this, and does link into the previous work, is that when we are under the most stress, when our head is down and we're doing the job and doing the job and doing the job and feeling that we just have to focus, keep the head down and just do this stuff that is coming in, it's exactly at that time that we need to pause. You might say to that person, we might hear people say, you know, are you planning for the future of social work? And you're like, I haven't got time to plan for the future. I'm just dealing with today. It's at exactly that time that you have to pause and you have to lift up your head and you have to put your hands out sideways, because the thing that we're hearing here is that support is there. Peer support is vital in your well-being and enabling you to breathe and to pause and to plan, so that we are not reacting. We are in actual fact planning the future, or attempting to, the future that we want to live in. And what I'm hearing is that this toolkit will offer you the chance to pause and to reflect and to breathe. That's all I have to say about this. Thank you for putting the toolkit together. It sounds like an amazing resource, and thank you to all of the people who have tuned in today. The session is being recorded and it will be available on the website. The next session today is going to start at 4:30 and it will be about social work, past, present and future. It's a book launch. It will be a pre-recorded session. And then this evening we have a session at 5:30 and that is going to be about the future of social work. And I think a lot of the strands and a lot of the issues that have come up in these sessions will certainly crop up again there. So I look forward to having more comments from you all. And then at the very end of today, we're going to have a little party because it is our 50 years. Yes! I'll see you all later today. Thank you very much for listening in. Bye-bye, everybody.